On today's show, it's a trade deadline recap with Danny Cunningham. Who else better to help us break it all down? Cavs didn't do anything. One of two teams did not make a deal. We'll debate all of that and talk about what Koby Altman had to say on this episode.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
All right, the music you heard on the way in is from our friends at Astro Radio. Check them out on Apple Music or Spotify. This episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Stop throwing your money away. Cancel those unwanted subscriptions and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/LockedOnNBA. I'm Chris Manning here with you from Diamond Up Rocks, the Just Basketball Show, and SB Nation Through the Sword. Evan is ducking our guest today. It's his birthday. Happy birthday to Evan. Happy belated birthday to Evan if you're listening to this on February 10th. But we have Danny Cunningham, the great, the one and only Danny Cunningham from ESPN 850 to talk all things trade deadline. Danny, how are you?
I'm just terrific. It was a busy day that didn't really have, obviously no deal kind of makes it different, but that doesn't make the day any less busy, I guess.
A very busy day that started. Let's start here before we get into the Cavs stuff, because the Cavs didn't do anything. Did you go to bed before the Kevin Durant trade broke?
Fell asleep about 10 minutes before. Like, I watched the end of the Mavericks-Clippers game, finished up writing, finished up some work responsibility, fell asleep about 12:45. And then I think the news broke about 1:10 Eastern time.
I made the mistake. I'd gotten done. I had just kind of gone through my nightly routine, got to bed a little bit later than I planned. And then I made the mistake of looking at Twitter and I see the Woj bomb. And then at that point, you can't really go to bed until you learn a little bit more. So about 45 minutes later, probably like 1:45 or 2, somewhere in there. It's a late night, not great. But you know what? Trade deadline day happens once a year, and you only get a Kevin Durant to Phoenix Woj bomb once in a lifetime. You know, it's a monumental moment. But Evan, the Cavs, oh my God, Freudian slip. Wow. This is tough for me. I apologize. But Danny, Cavs don't do anything. One of two teams not to do anything. Chicago Bulls, the other team not to do anything. Here is where I come down on this ultimately. And I find myself to be conflicted. I think there is an opportunity loss here to some degree. I think there is maybe a trade you could have found that would have helped you now to some degree. I also tend to think that there's probably not a really big move in the way people wanted, or like maybe some of the deals that were out there are not at the level, let's say, that people maybe think they are. Like Royce O'Neal would have been like a nice pickup. Is he changing your championship trajectory? Probably not. I'm curious to know what the price is for some of those guys. Ultimately, we probably never know. But I think they're useful trades, but I don't feel super like down on what happened here by the fact that they didn't do anything, because I don't think any of those trades change anything drastically, even if the Cavs are a little bit better if they would have made a trade.
I agree with that. I think that, maybe it makes them a little bit better, but it doesn't make them more of a championship contender than they are currently. I think the thing that makes them better in a sense is that Durant's no longer in the Eastern Conference. So now their playoff ceiling's a little bit higher. And I know we can dive into that a little bit later on. But I think that by not making a move today, which I do ultimately think was the right decision. If I were in Koby Altman's shoes, I don't think I would have made a trade today. The Durant trade and making the Nets potential sellers with guys like Royce O'Neal and Joe Harris would have certainly changed the thinking there. But I went to bed last night before that Durant trade, and I thought to myself, I'd be really stunned if the Cavs made a move tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of got to 50-50 early this afternoon as to whether or not I thought that they would. But if you were going to spend assets trying to add a piece, you now then have less assets to move maybe this summer. What I do think that this inaction, I guess, by the Cavs does is it creates a little bit of pressure to get something done this summer because they didn't spend any capital to do something today. So they will have that capital to use this summer. So letting that go to waste, I think, would then make today look worse. But you can't judge today, in my opinion, until you know the full story, which is set to take place later this summer.
The other part of that I think has to, come in here is that this team just didn't have there are two things I think maybe pushing against them making a deal, which if you read any of the trade slop coming up to the deadline, anything that was out there made it kind of clear that the Cavs were going to buy low if they were going to buy it all. They were not going to spend. And the guy they ended up getting most linked to in a lot of ways, Josh Hart, goes the day before the deadline. So that's off the board. And he went for a first, which they couldn't match. I think not having a first round pick impacted their ability to buy. I think some of the more interesting names, I think Brooklyn, I would guess they're asking for a first to reroute Dorian Finney-Smith. Probably asking for a first to take for Royce O'Neal. Probably asking for a first, for some of their other guys. You would need a couple first, I think, to get in the Mikal Bridges conversation, if that's even a conversation at all. I think the other thing is that you're right to look at this summer, and that'll kind of lead into when we get to talk about what Koby had to say. But I think that's putting a lot on what you maybe can get from Karis LeVert and a future first in the summer. And I do tend to think that one thing that has played in here is that they probably overvalued Karis LeVert at last year's deadline. And there's probably some just being we have to get close to value in return for him. And I don't think that's there with LeVert. I think the way he is viewed, I think what he is, I don't know if that is, even with its expiring salaries that don't meet as much now, that I think is a tricky player to move into another place. Some of these other teams that have moved on pieces have at least had semi-interesting names kind of does. I don't know what LeVert's value is to a lot of teams right now. And I think that has to play into this.
So I don't think LeVert's going to be a guy that gets moved this summer. After he didn't get traded today, I would expect him to be back on the team when training camp opens up next year. I would think that he's going to re-up with the Cavs over the summer. And I think that he's going to be someone that we see eventually traded, but not this summer. Maybe we're having these same discussions leading up to next trade deadline. I think that ultimately the Cavs are going to have to, at some point, I don't know if it's going to be next year, I don't know if it's going to be the year following. At some point, the Cavs are going to have to make another big splash. It won't be the size of the Donovan Mitchell splash, but it's going to have to be for a high-end role player. I think that Karis LeVert, whatever his future salary is, and when the Cavs have some draft pick capital built back up as time progresses, I think that is a deal that we could see maybe February 9th of 2024 or February 9th of 2025 when there is real organizational pressure to win at a high level. That just doesn't exist right now. The Cavs are still in a honeymoon phase where everything's gravy with Donovan Mitchell. And yeah, if they win in the playoffs and they make it to the second round this year, it'll be viewed as a success. But next year, there are expectations of making it to the conference final. There's pressure then that doesn't exist right now. And I do think it was a wise thing to try and save some draft capital for when maybe there are more or better options available that are legitimate upgrades that don't exist now, and being prepared to take that swing when it is there for you.
I think the only thing that I will say, and that we're going to break on this, and because Koby hit on this, and I think the most interesting thing he said is in relation to them wanting a runway, quote unquote, to mature. I do wonder how patient you can be with that runway and how long I think you're right to signal that next year is maybe when the dial gets turned up a little bit. And financially, Darius Garland's extension kicks in this summer. Donovan Mitchell's not far off from a new contract. Evan Mobley is not far off from being rookie extension eligible. You're going to have massive contracts coming due. Yes, new CBA, all of that. Maybe that gives you a little more wiggle room in the tax. We'll see what the language on that ultimately is. But you're going to have real money coming soon, and you don't have an unlimited window before you kind of just are who you are and are making moves around the edges. And look, maybe they re-sign LeVert and that's a tradable deal. We will see kind of what that looks like. Let's go on a break, though. Come back. We're going to talk about what Koby Altman, Cavs president of basketball operations, had to say about the deadline. Danny was there. He'll give us that inside scoop. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Try it free for 30 days. That's enough time to try and completely forget about a subscription or service. Before you know it, you're paying for subscriptions you don't even use every single month. With Rocket Money, you can change that with a few quick taps. Rocket Money, formerly known as Dribble, is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills all in one place. Over 80% of people have subscriptions they forgot about, like that streaming service you bought just to watch one show on, or that free trial you never even used. Rocket Money will quickly and easily identify your subscriptions for you so you can stop paying for the ones you don't want. Simply find the subscriptions you don't want and press cancel, and Rocket Money will cancel it for you. No more long hold times with customer service or tedious emailing back and forth. Rocket Money makes canceling subscriptions as easy as a click of a button. Over 3 million people have used Rocket Money, saving the average person up to $720 a year. Stop throwing your money away. Cancel unwanted subscriptions and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/lockednba. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedonNBA. rocketmoney.com/lockedonNBA. All right. Second segment, Chris Manning here with Danny Cunningham filling in for birthday boy Evan Dammerel. Danny, what stood out to you from what Koby Altman had to say on Thursday?
I think the thing that I took away first and foremost was that there wasn't a, quote, needle moving opportunity for them, where there wasn't someone available in a trade that they felt was a legitimate upgrade to what they have now. And I do think that speaks to kind of where they're at as a team, where there are certain times where teams need to make a trade just to make a trade because there needs to be a shakeup. We've experienced that with the Cavs before. That's not where the Cavs were right now. Like, this wasn't a team that just needed to be shaken up for the sake of shaking it up. So that was something that stood out to me, that they didn't want to spend assets, especially, Chris, with the price of some role players that we've seen. I mean, Gary Payton II got 5 second-round. The Blazers got 5 second-round picks for him. Like, if GP2 is going for a second, I have to imagine the price for a guy like Royce O'Neal was probably a first. Like, if that price would have been Dylan Windler and Jetty Osman and 3 2s, is that a deal that gets done? Or maybe 2 2s? Does that get done? I don't know. But the prices of these guys was so exorbitant across the league that it became something where, you know, for the Cavs, it was kind of out of their price range. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But it's kind of the fact of the matter. So I really took away that they didn't want to make a move just for the sake of making a move. And Koby Altman's a guy that has made a ton of moves throughout his executive career. And I think him sitting out this deadline the way that he did says a lot.
I agree. I also found two other things kind of interesting. Number one, that he expected a quiet deadline, and then he said he was caught off guard by the chaos of it. This was a very active trade deadline. A lot of tangential moves. I think maybe the Durant thing caught teams. I'm sure that caught a lot of teams off guard. It happened in the middle of the night. I think I know, like, there were people in the Cavs who, like, obviously had who were in bed and, like, found out the same way like people on Twitter did, just like woke up, see the Woj bomb. Like, that's like a reality of sometimes this business when deals happen like that late at night. I think the runway comment is also interesting because I do again wonder, like, how you balance that. It is not as extreme as like the Warriors like 2 timelines thing with Wiseman, which obviously they punted on at the deadline. But like you were, I think in the way the NBA works, in the era we're in, where stars are asking out, where stars are demanding organizations give them kind of what they want, you don't have like a limited time to kind of prove yourself to these guys over and over and over again. And I wonder what internally that locker room thinks of like where they are versus where the front office is and what that divide is. And I wonder what they kind of think about like how long their runway is, what the title contention window kind of is. Like, is it this year? Is it next year? Like, what is their runway versus what the front office think? That's like never going to be something we get like fully like concrete figured out. But I do wonder like that would be like a true serious question for me, is like, what do these two camps think of where they're at and how do they kind of view these separate?
Yeah, I basically think what you're asking, Chris, is do the Cavs in the locker room understand how young they are? Because that is something that the Cavs, from JB to Koby, that is something they bring up a lot.
Dating back to media day. This was a talking point on day one.
Yes, they talk about that all the time. I don't know if that's something that resonates in the locker room. I don't know if that's something that is talked about to the players from the executives or the coaching staff. And listen, to be fair to the Cavs, they're not wrong about it. I don't know how much it should matter, but they are the second youngest starting lineup in basketball. Like, that is a factual statement that Koby Altman brought up today during his availability. I don't know how much that matters to guys like Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. Like, I know that's not something that when they're down by 3 against Miami, that doesn't matter to them. Like, they're not thinking, oh, we're just young. Like, that's not something that happens. But in the long run, it might be something that they do. And if they do understand it, the Cavs are going to have more time and they don't have to make a panic type of move, because that's not something we've seen Altman do really throughout his entire career. Like, if you want to go back to the first trade deadline, a panic move would have been trading that Nets pick, and he didn't do that. And they've been sellers since. And maybe you want to call the Karis LeVert trade last year that's so that I buy that because of what that team looked like. But that's the argument I could hear.
That is where I was going to go, because I think that was forcing like a square peg into a round Ricky Rubio shaped hole in terms of what you were getting to like supplement Garland and replace what Rubio brought you. That was like, okay, we need ball handling. We have a chance to win. Like, let's just get a ball handler. And that felt a little...
I do think they needed something, because if you think back, I mean, Garland was so spent because Ricky was gone. Colin was out for the year.
He had that back issue that kind of lingered for a while.
Yes, like they legitimately, I don't know that Karis was the right guy to go after, but I do think they needed to make a move for that, for someone that could supplement Darius there.
I think that's right. I also think I would feel differently about that move from a value perspective if it wasn't the first. I think the first is where that gets a little... I just don't know if like his value was really that, is where I kind of get to that. That is where my concern gets with that. And that leads us to thinking about what Kobe said about Karis, and that there is interest in bringing him back beyond the season. What do you make of that, Danny?
Well, I don't think that they can let that contract slot die out. Like, I kind of think that whether Karis is on the team long-term or not, I just don't think that the Cavs can afford to let him walk and then not be able to replace that type of money, because they're an over-the-cap team. So I think that is the thing more than anything. And listen, I do genuinely think Karis likes it here. I think it's been difficult to an extent trying to play so many different roles the way that he has, but I think that he likes it here. I think that he likes it in that locker room. I think that the Cavs really do like Karis as a person. And Kobe mentioned that when talking about buyout guys, like someone, if they were going to bring someone else in, they need to fit in from a character standpoint. And Karis does. So I think that eventually he will get traded, but I think that they want to bring him back because, one, they do value him. They genuinely believe that it can work with him, but also they can't just let him walk for nothing. Like that would be asset malpractice.
I think that is with him and Kevin Love.
I agree. I think Kevin Love's going to be back on a smaller deal. Listen, for all we know, Kevin Love might retire too. Like that's another thing. But I would be very surprised if he gets bought out.
Kobe said as much that they're not going to buy him out. That was kind of out there a little bit before the deadline, that was a guy teams were monitoring. Matt Moore at the Action Network had that in one of his little write-ups. I think there was less probably trade on ability with Love. But he's a guy that has youth for you if you can keep him. The question I have there is just like, what does he think about him not playing right now? That is like an open question.
And I don't have an answer to that, Chris.
No one does.
Yeah.
JB Bickerstaff
Kevin does. That's it.
Well, Kevin does, but like, A, he's not always going to be around. And two, if you ask Bickerstaff about it, or if you ask the players about it, that is like the quickest way. Bickerstaff got asked about this the other night, and he basically gave the shortest, curtest answer he gave the entire press conference after a very easy win. That tells you that is like, I don't really want to talk about this, and I'm not going to be open with you guys about this in a public setting. That's fine. But that means this is just pure speculation corner about what's going on with Kevin Love. And like Kobe did say, maybe he'll get a chance to play again this year. I do believe that's probably the case. But what that looks like is a really open question. So
let me ask you this, Chris. What would you be more surprised by? Kevin Love getting bought out or Kevin Love scoring 10 points in a playoff game?
Kevin Love getting bought out.
I think we're in the same place. Like, I do think, and listen, who's to say that he's not going to return from the All-Star break? And I would, at this point, I'd be surprised if he plays in another game before the All-Star break, unless an injury to someone else happens. Who's to say Kevin doesn't get back from the All-Star break, hasn't played in 3 weeks, and looks like the guy that started the season with the Cavs where he was shooting 40% from three? Like, that is a thing that very well could happen.
And look, he told Chris Feudo of Cleveland.com that his thumb was bothering him after, like, the Pickers have said it kind of wasn't really a big deal. Like, I think that thumb is a thing, and he was playing through it. I think that feels very kind of obvious in retrospect.
I mean, he was shooting like 29% from three after that thumb injury. Like, there are nights where he has looked okay. Like, he made 3 threes in the one game, but a vast majority of the time, like, his shot, and it's not as if his shot was just like he having an off night. Some of these shots were bad misses, man, that a Hall of Famer like Kevin Love has never missed on throughout his career.
He was playing at, like, I think relatively close to the 6th man of the year level he was at last year for part of this year, and then the thumb injury happens, and that changed the trajectory of what's going on here. What happens with him the rest of this year, next year, a very fascinating question, and I would love to know too what the guys in the locker room, I should say, think about what's going on with Kevin. All right, one more break, come back. We're going to look at the top of the East, where trades were made, but maybe the biggest one, I think the obviously biggest one, is a team kind of exiting the race for the top 4. So we'll talk about that. But first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This year, the only app you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Look, we're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sports betting partner in America. That's FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will win a touchdown. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no-sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, last segment, Locked On Cavs. Danny Cunningham is with me today. Evan's out. Happy birthday to Evan. Trades to the top of the East, Danny. Kevin Durant to Phoenix, leaving Brooklyn after Kyrie goes to Dallas. They brought in some pieces I like, obviously Royce O'Neal. Jake Crowder's brought in. He gets rerouted to Milwaukee. They got Dorian Finney-Smith. They got Spencer Dinwiddie. They got some pieces that, like, I think that team is now taking a step back. I think, like, Crowder will help Milwaukee. I think Mike Muscala is going to help Boston to some degree. I think Jalen McDaniels probably helps Philly to some degree. Cavs are the only team in that top 4, with Brooklyn kind of taking a step back, that did make a move. But I still think right now, the Cavs have to be a team that finishes in the top 4. There's not, like, that is like a baseline level of where they have to finish now, I think.
Okay, let me ask you. I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. What do you think is more likely? They finish 3rd or they finish 5th? Because right now they have a 4-game lead over Miami, who is in 6th. And we both agree that Brooklyn's going to fade a little bit here. I think Brooklyn will probably be a play-in team. They've won too many games already to miss the play-in altogether, but they'll be a play-in team. They're only behind Philadelphia by 1 game right now. And what I think is really interesting is if you look at the end of the season, because the Cavaliers really do not have many difficult games after the middle of March or even the start of March. So the Cavs have a 4-game road trip. It's their longest one of the season left. It's 2 games in Miami, 2 games in Charlotte. After that, they play Philly, and then Washington, 2 games in Brooklyn, Houston, Atlanta, the Knicks, the Pacers, 2 games with the Magic, and Charlotte to wrap up. The end of the season for Philly is at Golden State, at Phoenix, which is a very different Phoenix team now, at Denver, Dallas, which is a very different Dallas team now, Toronto, at Milwaukee, Boston, Miami, at Atlanta, at Brooklyn. The Cavaliers absolutely are in a position now to where not only should finishing in the top 4 be sort of required, but I think that the goal should be getting into the top 3 because it is very, very attainable when looking at the schedules.
I absolutely agree with that. I think if you're in this position where Kevin Durant is out of the conference and you have this easier schedule down the stretch and you are healthy, you have everyone available to you now, aside from, Dylan Windler, who wasn't going to play for you anyway. You have your roster now. You have everyone in tow. You're probably going to get I would assume you're going to get a better looking version of Donovan Mitchell when he comes back from All-Star break and has a little more time for that groin to get fully right. You take care of business in games you're supposed to. Like the biggest theme of this past week, Danny, is that they beat Indiana, they beat Washington, and they beat the Pistons. They won these 3 games that they needed to win that they were supposed to win. You do that the rest of the year, you've got a very good shot of being top 3, and that gives you not only a great chance of getting out of the first round, a better chance if you're in the 4-5 and theoretically get the Knicks or the Heat or something. But you're going to I'm not going to say that they're going to be favorites to get out of round 2, but you're going to get something in round 2 that could really test you, and you're probably avoiding one of Boston or you're going to get one of Boston or Milwaukee regardless anyway, but you're maybe going to get the slightly lesser one, and that's going to be a really, really good experience if you can get into that 3 seed, get a 2-3 matchup, and get something that's really going to push you. That is where I think that the cap of the season kind of gets to. I don't think a trade would have changed that. Really, I don't think one of these guys is necessarily tilting a second-round series. But you have this opportunity now without Durant in the conference to really, I think, push for that 3. And if you get that is a potential catalyst into next season for this.
Yes. And so let me say something, and I'm very curious how you feel about it, but I went to bed prior to the Durant trade last night, as we already established. So when I went to bed last night, and I wasn't thinking specifically about this last night, but my thinking after the game yesterday was, there's a 40, maybe 45% chance that the Cavs make it to the second round of the playoffs this year. And maybe that would have been a little generous. I woke up this morning and I saw the Durant news. Now I feel as if there is a 65 to 70% chance this is a second round playoff.
I would almost feel like I would go higher, but that is maybe really under. I think they are a step above if let's say they are 4, right? So if you're the 4 seed, you're probably getting the Heat or the Knicks.
My guess is you're getting the Heat, which I think that series would be an absolute dogfight. I'm not saying that the Cavs would win or wouldn't, but that series is going down to the wire in a game 6, if not a game 7.
Would be a really good experience for them, I think. The Knicks aren't bad either. That's a pretty good team, and Brunson's having a really good year. Randall just gave them a handful the last time they played, although maybe just a little hot from 3. But I mean, even if you're probably
New York differently in a playoff setting too.
Yeah.
I would be pretty confident in the Cavs to beat the Knicks. I would not be as confident in the Cavs to beat Miami.
Here's the thing. They're probably getting one of those teams in the first round.
Or Atlanta. I think that the perfect draw for them in the first round is if they get to 3 and Atlanta gets to 6.
Here's the thing. The perfect draw for any of these top teams is that if Atlanta if you're 2, you're hoping Atlanta is the team in the play-in that you can maybe take advantage of. That's kind of, I think, what you're hoping. That's the team that I would kind of want, if I'm being honest. I would go somewhere around 80% that I think they get to the second round.
Wow,
that is where
that's very high.
Maybe I'm an optimist, and
that's what people always say about you, Chris. You are the eternal optimist.
Yeah, the guy. That's Chipper. They call me Chipper Chris Manning, just super positive dude.
It's in your Twitter bio, isn't it?
Yeah. I just when you listen to lots of Phoebe Bridgers, you're just obviously a very happy, well-adjusted human being.
That's what I just always thought.
I think they're a step above those 2 teams. I agree with you that Miami would be an app. Honestly, I think seeing playoff Jimmy Butler would be really good for this group if they could overcome that. They would get something out of that series if they go against playoff Jimmy Butler. Is where I kind of come down on that.
I agree. It would be tough, and not only playoff Jimmy Butler, I think it would be a great thing in terms of growth for JB Bickerstaff to have to coach against Eric Spoelstra in a playoff setting. Like that is the toughest test he could have as a coach in the entire playoffs, is going against Spo.
Yeah. I think there's no question about that. The thing I will say is, like, we did a show on the Just Basketball show. Brendan Clean and I picked the teams we thought would make the second round in the East, like the Final Four of the East, and we did it for the West. I picked the Cavs pre-KD trade to make it to the Final Four. I think Philly, but this was pre like them going on like the full crazy run, and I kind of had regrets after that trade. After that pot, I was like, okay, like, I don't know if this was like really like the best decision that I ever made.
We've all had bad takes.
Look, bad takes are part of life. Next Wednesday, Cavs Sixers right before the All-Star break is one of the biggest games of the season to date. Is I think where this leads.
Huge,
absolutely
and they
huge
played,
game.
and well, it's big for a couple of reasons. Obviously, you look at the standings; like they're one game apart. That game's going to matter a lot. They only play 3 times this year. The Cavs already have a win in their back pocket. So the Cavs have to win. If the Cavs win one of the remaining 2 games against Philly, they own the tiebreaker, which could be a really, really big deal. And then even looking further ahead, they're in really good tiebreaker position against the Bucks. They're in really good tiebreaker position against the Celtics as well. Like, the Cavs could have tiebreakers over everybody should it come down to that. Beating Philly next Wednesday would be ginormous for them, especially considering I think that they'll still be on a pretty good run until then. Maybe they drop one of these 2 this weekend, but I would expect them to beat the Spurs on Monday. So they would be able to go in the All-Star break feeling awesome about themselves.
Yeah, gotta absolutely just like beat the Spurs, who are bad, and you can't have like any more. Like, if they want to be a 3 seed, they probably can't have any more of those like silly letdown bad performance games the rest of the year.
Think about how many of those games they have left. Like, they've got 3 games with Charlotte left. They've got 2 with Orlando left, I think. If not, 2 with Orlando.
And Orlando's going to play you hard. Like, Orlando's going to show up and play you. Like, they are,
but they're not
bad.
Good. They've got San Antonio. They've got Houston. Those 2 games with Brooklyn now in mid-March don't look nearly as daunting as they did before. Like, the Cavs now, their schedule got easier today significantly because of that trade.
Danielle, in on this, fill in the blank. The biggest X factor Cavs player for this final stretch post All-Star break, where they did in a world where they didn't make a trade. Who is that X factor?
It's Isaac Okoro. There are obviously cases for other guys to be made, but I think that the Cavs not making a trade today is a bet on Isaac Okoro continuing to be the guy that he's been for the last 2 months. If he's going to keep shooting at the rate he is, and I understand that shooting at 50% from 3 the way he has since January 1st is not sustainable. But since November 13th, Isaac Okoro is shooting just a tick under 40% from 3. If he is that guy, it justifies the decision to not trade for another 3-and-D wing. I
think that's dead on. I have nothing to add to that. If he is this guy, or plays like he is this guy the rest of the year, even if there's some ups and downs, you have kind of what you need. And I wonder, they do have an open roster spot. I don't know if they'll get maybe any of the big names on the market. Like, I don't think they're going to be in the Danny Green race. But I wonder if there's someone on the market that they could convince to kind of come in and provide some more usable wing depth. Like a Will Barton isn't like the super most interesting thing to me, but like, he's available.
It's Danny Green and Will Barton are the 2 guys that might be fits. Other than that, I mean, we still have to see who becomes available, but I'm not super interested in any of the names that have been reported so far.
I mean, you don't want Russell Westbrook if you're the Cavs?
I think that you have a better chance of playing for the Cavs than Russell Westbrook does this year.
And guess what? I would get absolutely smoked off of the court. It would be really bad. It would be embarrassing for everyone. Brother, can you imagine being like, hey, like, we have Ricky Rubio and like we're going to also have Russell Westbrook? I think Bickerstaff's head might explode.
I would legitimately rather have Raul Neto than Russell Westbrook.
Be a good Coachella jersey, though.
It would be.
That's about the only upside.
Well, I hope we get a Jazz one. I hope someone makes a Jazz one.
Like the Rasheed Hawks jersey, yeah. I feel like we need that. I absolutely think that.
Hello Hawks jersey when he was there for a day.
Yeah. Oh, man. Oh, there's some... Oof. All right, that is going to be it, though, for this post-deadline episode of Locked On Cavs. Check out Danny Cunningham. Read his Cavs stuff at thelandondemand.com. Hear him on the airwaves at ESPN 850. Danny, thank you so much for filling in for Evan. Sorry he ducked you again. I apologize for my co-hosts.
It's just what life has become, just getting ducked by Evan Dammarell every time I'm on.
Yeah, it's real troubling. We'll be back on Monday. Get 2 Cavs games this weekend. Got Cavs, Pelicans, and the Pelicans aren't playing well. That's a very, very winnable game on the road Friday. Bulls at home on Saturday, another winnable game for the Cavs. We'll recap those games, talk about where everything is at come Monday. Thanks again for listening, making us your first listen every day. Thanks again to Jake Stevens for producing. Talk to y'all Monday.